Good evening, Heather. Welcome to RunChats with Ron Runs NYC, although actually it is morning for you in Doha. So how are you doing?
Yeah, it is morning. It's a little early, so apologies in advance.
Yeah, so
Still half asleep.
we're on opposite ends of the spectrum. I'm trying to
Yes.
decide if it's bedtime for me as 11:38, which it's not, as my listeners know. I'm a late night vampire, and you are getting up super early for us. So thank you so much for getting up early and shuffling your schedule to come on and talk to us.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so tell our listeners, because you are the furthest guest to ever be on the show, tell them how you
Ooh,
ended up in Doha and what that was all about, how you ended up there and how you're still there,
okay.
what you're doing over there.
Okay. I'll try to make this not a long story. Um, so I grew up in Canada, near Calgary, Alberta, until I was about 21. And then I started moving around actually for my ex's job. So we lived in South Carolina, we lived in Northern Italy, we lived in the UK. So I started living abroad probably about 15 years ago. And so when that situation ended, I kind of was like, well, what do I do with myself now? And I got a job offer in Kuwait. And at the time, I knew nothing about Kuwait except for the Gulf War from when I was about 10 years old watching it on the news. And I thought about it, talked about it with my parents, and they're like, you know what? You'll regret it if you don't try it. So why don't you just go? If you don't like it, we'll fly you home. I'm like, oh, okay. So by myself, single white woman moves to the Middle East, not knowing what I was getting myself into. So I was there for a couple years. And then while I was living in Kuwait, I got a job offer here in Doha, Qatar, and I came to visit for a weekend just to see what it was like. And then I realized, oh, this is a much, better place to live to fit my lifestyle. So that was about almost 5 years ago now. I've been here ever since.
Wow, what an interesting journey. So from the mountains in Canada to the Middle East, and
Yeah.
that's exciting. I mean, personally, I have a huge love for travel, and I think one of the things that's impacted us all so much with COVID, besides most of us are just so completely cut off from our families, and
Yeah.
in most cases, when people say their families are they're cut off, but they're not cut off at the distance that you are. You are
Yeah.
literally around the globe from your family.
Yeah. It's actually, yeah. It's been really tough in that sense that usually I would spend at least a month back home in Canada every summer at minimum. And my parents would come out wherever I was, at least for a few weeks at a time. But it's probably been almost 2 years now since I've seen my parents. I haven't been able to get back to Canada. My partner actually lives in South Africa now. So I got stuck there for about 6 months during lockdown, which is not the worst place to get stuck, but that also meant that I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't see my family. I had to come straight back to Doha to get back to work as soon as the borders opened. So it's been a really strange COVID year for me.
Yeah, it's well, you are really far and distant from family and your
Yeah.
partner in South Africa.
Yeah.
And I think it just puts so much extra stress on all of
Yeah.
us. And how we're
Yeah.
managing that is different for everybody. But it's
Yeah.
certainly in your career, you can talk a little bit about what you do, because it certainly lends
Yes.
itself for every one of my listeners. I tell
Yeah.
them all the time, running's our therapy. Lace them up, get
Yeah.
out the door, keep lacing them, get out the door.
Yeah.
And when you're injured, you still have to find some way to move, to
Yeah.
keep yourself together right now. So tell
Yeah.
us about a little bit about that.
Oh, yeah. So actually, I'm a psychologist. So I started my career in community mental health doing therapy. And I just happened to get into, when I moved to Kuwait, working with children in the school setting. So now I'm working a lot with kids doing different types of assessments and therapy, working with the community, working with parents, to help support children around, learning disabilities, mental health concerns, autism, things like that. But more so this year, my job even shifted more because within our organization, the well-being of everybody was affected. So this year has been a lot about supporting staff and colleagues. I work for a really large organization, so it was really, this is a place where everybody is also trapped away from their families. Nobody could travel, right? So I think in Qatar, 85% of the population are expats. So people from all over the world live here, and everybody's, can't travel, is away from their family, has extra stressors, with COVID and all the work demands, and then going online and not knowing really how to manage, that new learning or working environment. So yeah, it's been a lot of supporting everybody's mental health this year. It's been a big struggle. So yeah, that's another big initiatives that we've done over here to support our staff with chronic stress management and burnout prevention and compassion fatigue and all of those things that have increased so much since the pandemic started.
Well, that's wonderful work, that you're doing, particularly on the learning disability side. So kudos to you on that. Always, it makes me happy when I talk with people. I had a guest on who she worked with kids with dyslexia and reading disorders and so many other things that she focused on, and then started a running community for these kids who were so focused on, the two things together, being so goal oriented to be able to kind of unlock the mysteries and the challenges and the difficulties for them to process, characters and the alphabet and different things that they struggle with. And so we talked about like some sort of running group that she could, fund and form for them. And it's amazing because there's really almost no reward. There's almost no reward other than, like they're giving them like things, cutting things out of construction paper, and like, they're not real like medals and larger things, some medals and whatnot. But for the most part, almost just like attendance to come before school, and these kids never miss it. They're there. They want to be there, and they want to run around this little schoolyard area, and they want to earn their badges. The way Strava is, if you're on Strava, I don't know, so many of the runners I know are, for running and cycling to record their activities, but goals-based things where you're encouraging somebody to do something. People always think the reward has to be a large thing. And that's where people get it wrong, because most times it doesn't need to be anything at all. That's why Peloton is so successful, not only because the instructors are fit and they're cool and they communicate with you and they create some energy, but because everything you do, you're getting another badge. You've earned another X number of rides or runs and miles. You get more friends in this community and you thrive and you make more connections. So all of that is really super. But as far as like for us, for runners, for everybody else out there, in terms of like advice, what's some good advice you could share with all of us? Because I know me personally, just having an injury myself right now, I know that until the MRI results were back, and I didn't need them because I already knew like that I was really injured. You just know your body after all these years of running. I can't begin to tell you the difference in me on those days when I couldn't do anything and I had to wait until I knew I could. And I can't run for at least a month or two, let's say, but I was able to do a Peloton riding class today at the gym, and I can ride a stationary bike. I can swim. My outlook, my personality, it's almost like a black veil was lifted over me, because the amount of time between when I can run again, that has nothing to do with it. I just couldn't do anything, or I was afraid if I did, I might risk it worse. So for me, I just know being able to move, the movement piece for me was everything. And it just was like all the stress just melted away. And I always felt like it's only running that can give me that, but oh man, was I wrong, I
know that feeling, because that happened to me. It's been about 1.5 years now. I was so excited. I went to Bulgaria by myself to do my first sky race. I'm super excited about, this is the first, official sky race that I'm going to do. And the day before the event, I was up in the mountains there because I want to be up in the mountains as much as I can, checking out the route, having lunch, sitting by this crystal clear lake at, 2,000 meters above sea level. And on the way back down, out of nowhere, on a really untechnical spot, I fell and busted my ankle, not knowing at the time there was fractures and ligament tears. And eventually, 3 MRIs later, I found out that I should have been booted from day 1, and I couldn't run for about 6 months. And initially that was like, I don't know what to do. Like, running is everything to me. Like, well, how am I going to survive? How am I going to, so that's when I realized, I started getting more into mountain biking and, even just going to the gym to move. And I started running with a weighted or a flotation belt in the pool, outdoor pool, so I could at least get, the sunlight and stuff, and lots of walking outside. So for me, it was really being outside was what saved me, I think. Movement, of course, in any way, but being outside, I think that's what I realized, like, that's what I need in my life to feel better.
It's great advice. So, because as runners, particularly, you're focused on ultra, trail, mountain running, things of that nature. So the distances obviously are a lot further. But my friends always get confused that aren't in the ultra world or haven't gone into it yet, like I have. And I just tell everybody they just haven't gotten there yet. They'll get there, and they're just delaying their joy. I mean, it's a more sublime experience. It's running the way it's meant to be, where you're not ever. I mean, for me, when I go on those long runs on a trail somewhere, I literally am never paying any attention to how far I've gone, how many miles I've run, or how fast I'm going. I'm just making sure, to your point, like, watch where I'm going, because man, you take your eye off for 1 second and you hit a tree root, or, you just land funny. And that's the thing. But even that, to me, that's just exciting. And it just makes the whole experience there's just so much more. There's more depth and layers to it. And look, you're in nature. And look, that's how you ended up on the show. I talked about it before we popped on, so for everybody on the Instagram side, it's Heather Runs Trails, or I'm sorry, Heather Runs _trails. I personally am a huge fan of anybody's feed who takes a lot of shots while they're out there. I don't care if they're a triathlete, they're an Ironman and their bike photos. I don't care if they're trail runners, mountain runners. I don't care. You could be cross-country skiing. If you're out there in nature and the elements and you're shooting, beautiful photography, I don't care if it's on an iPhone, a GoPro, whatever it is, I'm into your feed right off the bat. So I'm there. But you take some spectacular shots. I mean, you just got very, very high quality shots. And, look, it's, I've noticed it for a while on your feed, and for me, like, that whole trail experience, that's what it gives you. Because when we talk about routines before, even like my friend Darcy, who was on the pod, who works with the kids with dyslexia and reading challenges, they just wanted to show up. They wanted to earn their badge. They wanted to come from school and be part of that group and do whatever, they needed to do. And running, like anything else, can become monotonous or boring if I know people who literally run on a track. Like, a track workout's fine, but to run on a track when you're not doing a track workout, it's one thing when they do ultra runners, as we know, do 24-hour things on the track and all these other world record things that people are trying to do. That's different. If somebody were to tell me that, I could almost deal with that. But the idea of going to run like 10 or 12 or 14 miles on the track, like, for no other reason I'm not doing a track workout, like, it's not happening. Like, I'm going to find somewhere else to run. Definitely going to figure it out. But with running regular roads, if you will, it can get boring. If our routes are, even as beautiful as Central Park is, where I run a lot of my miles, as spectacular and beautiful it is, you can get on the dirt, you can get in trails in the park and the inside. It's easy to find. And then I live on the waterfront. I'm directly across from Manhattan. Now, I'm not in the city anymore after many years there. So I have the best view of the city than you could have, much better than when you actually live there. So I can run the 60-mile run that I did for Tommy Rivers. I ran all the way out to Liberty State Park, which is as close as you can get to the Statue of Liberty. On the New Jersey side, you can feel like you can touch Lady Liberty. And the wind was blowing like 40 miles an hour out there, which is so funny because I went on Facebook Live and I was getting blown around while I'm trying to talk to people. And then I ran like all the way up to the George Washington Bridge and then back to my ferry. And then I went across to New York and did the last 20 or 21 miles in the city. But you can get bored with regular routes. On trail routes, that never happens. No. When you go on these trail runs, do you ever sit there and go, oh, I'm bored. I don't like this route anymore. I mean, come on.
No, I mean, even so I live on a giant pile of sand right now, right? Coming from like the Canadian Rockies, people are always like, why would you live there? Or isn't it boring? And I'm like, you know what? Like, I go out in the desert, I take my Jeep, I just drive out wherever. Here, the desert's super accessible. And I just go out and I find all these random things that people here have like never seen before. There's people who have lived here for 20 years and they're like, we didn't even know that existed, like old like petroglyphs and rock carvings and just things like that. So I think it's super cool.
So you have an adventurous spirit, which is
I do.
you're intrepid, and
Yeah.
you love travel. So we're
do.
learning more about you. I remember in your blog, which if I recall, you started it right around when COVID started, or maybe when you first got
Yes,
over to Doha.
That was the trigger. I was stuck in South Africa. I was on a 2-month leave from work, regular vacation time, nothing to do with COVID. But I'm like, what do I do with myself now? Everyone always said, you should do a blog. And I'm like, oh, but everyone does blogs. No one's going to want to read my blog. And then when I had a lot of spare time. So I'm like, okay, this is the time to start it.
That's great. Now, do you have like a way where they can communicate with you directly, or do they just like email questions back to you and things like that? Or do you just basically write and, then people reach out to you through your Instagram page in terms of like trying to keep some sort of dialogue going with them?
I think it's a little bit of all of the above, but to be honest, I get more feedback on my Instagram page than anything else. And to be fair, I've been slacking a little bit on the blog lately now that work has resumed full time. And I actually started my doctorate in December, and I didn't, realize that I've kind of signed myself up for, and then that was also when the training was getting to its peak for this, around Qatar event. So the blog has taken a back seat in recent months, which I know that, I don't want to let it slide. So, yeah.
Hey, I'm going to give you a pass. When you say you're getting ready for your doctorate, and I know you literally when we're messaging about trying to coordinate this, you're like, yeah, I have this to do, and I'm like, okay, I think that's more important than a podcast.
Still not done. That paper's still not done.
Now I feel even more guilty. I'm happy you're on here with us, but now I'm starting to feel more guilty.
Nah, I'm joking.
Yeah, but that burden though, and this is your career, this is your business. Yeah. This stuff builds up. It builds up the same way, we're talking about movement. I mean, for everybody here listening on this show, we just know runners get injured. It's just a fact of life, whether it's a fall on a trail or it's overtraining. It's just life. I mean, you could be high school age, you could be my age, it doesn't matter. Or if you're a cyclist, a swimmer, our bodies, as strong as they are and as fit as we are, whether it's overuse, wear and tear, the accidental things that occur to us, when it happens, the key to it all is to figure out, like, don't rush it. You got to accept whatever that information is. You just have to accept it right off the bat. In your case, it was, you were still running and you had ligament damage and fractures and you didn't know. And man, that is even more difficult because remember, and I don't know if I was saying this before we came on or not, because sometimes I mix that up a little, but I actually did not. Everyone thinks of me as this crazy type A because I do so many miles. Like, I wouldn't go on the Peloton and I wouldn't go, even the pool I knew would be okay. I didn't need my doctor to tell me I could swim. I knew that would be okay, but I honestly don't like swimming. That's my least favorite. But I literally delayed until I saw him in person. I got fitted for the brace for my knee because I have the fracture. And he's like, look, you can ride the stationary bike or even your road bike when the weather warms without the brace. Won't need you to have the brace on when you're riding because it's not the impact. He goes, but I wanted to get that okay, so I didn't rush it. But with me...
Well, I got the okay, though. That was the hardest part, is that the first few MRIs missed or were misdiagnosed. So I was in physio, and the type of sprain they thought I had usually responds best to like getting back in there as soon as possible and getting the mobility and stability back. So my physio was pushing me hard, not knowing that there's fractures in there. So I actually set myself back knowing that if I would have just been completely immobilized for the first, 6 weeks, that could have been it.
Wow.
So,
yeah. Well, that's just such, I would say a tough break, but it's going to sound silly. It is a tough break. And I'm expecting all of those jokes with me right now with a fractured knee. So I'm just like, whatever, bring on the puns, bring it all on. But for everybody out there, there's always the light at the end of the tunnel and movement. When I move, I close every pod with keep lacing them up, keep getting out the door. Always remember to stay in the fight. Those are like my sayings in and out of pods. And So I can't lace him up right now, and I
Yeah.
can't keep going out the door in that way. But I can absolutely go out the door to go ride a Peloton bike in my gym. I can go swim. I'm going to limit walking because honestly, even though it isn't that much impact compared to running, I'm not going to walk a lot. It just doesn't make any sense. I'm not really a big fan of walking a lot anyway. So other than with my dog, no problem giving her a nice extended walk. But for everybody out there, you just got to figure it out. If it's a mountain bike for a while, if it's on the trail, if it's in the pool, whatever it is, just make sure you keep moving, because each day that you go further out without being active, it will become harder to get re-engaged.
Exactly.
So that could be a week. If it week becomes 2 weeks and 2 weeks becomes 3 weeks, and I don't care what you weigh, it has nothing to do with that. I'm talking about your mental state of mind, your happiness as a human being, to going into a dark place pretty quickly, because
because it can get into that downward spiral, right? Like the worse you feel because you haven't got out, the harder it is to now get out. So it just keeps spiraling downwards, and
it can. And even just speaking on my own, just a couple of days, even, it wasn't even, well, it's been a month since it actually happened, or just around a month, but it wasn't a whole month between when I could do anything, but it was close. But I got to tell you, even just the days when I waited from seeing him to just doing it, that even those few days felt like an eternity. And now I feel like I'm recharged, because I did an hour class. It wasn't like I did some epic thing. I mean, I did an hour class. I moved, I sweated, I got my heart rate up, and I had a mask on, which of course none of us want to wear, but too bad. This is life. I mean, just exercising with them in the desert, though, you could just go for a run and you don't have to worry about social distance running in the desert, right?
That is a nice thing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. So before we get into this insanely epic, cool event that you all put together in Doha, which I just can't wait for you to share that with everybody, because it's awesome. Talk a little bit about how you got involved with running, as a kid, how that all got started, and just like sports in general as a kid. Like, what were you into? What athletics did you do?
So I was always athletic. I was never the artsy person. I was not the creative person. I love sports. And I think I started with organized sports probably in around 5th, 6th grade. I got into basketball. I loved basketball. I was obsessed with basketball all through like middle school. My whole weekends would be watching like NBA on NBC. I remember that, with Ahmad Rashad. And I was just like, my parents would have said like, you're obsessed, like this is not healthy. But when people find that funny now, because that's the furthest I don't watch sports on TV hardly at all, except for the odd hockey game because I'm Canadian. But
what position did you play in hoops?
I was the right forward. Usually I was too tall to be the point guard, and I wasn't tall enough to be down under the net. So
okay. Were you a shooter? Did you like to shoot?
Yes. Oh yeah. My long game was good.
So you were going out to 3-point range. I like it.
Yeah. I also got into volleyball and badminton at the time. Those are sort of my 3 sports growing up. And I actually went to like the provincial level in badminton in Alberta. And I always ran a little bit, but it was more for the training for the other sports, shorter distances, no more than 5K, didn't really like it. It was also kind of forced on you, right? Coach says you have to go run, and it's like, oh, like that was the last thing. Yeah, it was really, and running lines and drills and stuff like that. But my dad's always been a runner. And I remember growing up, like dad's always going to a race, dad's out for a run, dad's got these really short shorts. What are those? Those are embarrassing, or things like that.
I love it.
Mom's buying dad the longer shorts every time it's his birthday or Father's Day, just to get him out of the short shorts. But those are running shorts. And even I even remember my mom and I saying like, dad's crazy. He's doing this ultra marathon this weekend. Like, this is ridiculous. And I don't even think we went out and supported or watched him, or she might go out like once or twice during the day. And like, that was it. It wasn't like, oh, this is a cool thing, let's go support dad. I just didn't get it. Like, I didn't understand it. And then when I got out of high school into university, that's when organized sports ended for me. It was just about studying. I wasn't good enough to get any scholarships or anything like that to play sports in university. So I was kind of like, well, what do I do with myself now? I did get into, for the first time in my life, into, you know, weight training and stuff like that, which was so new to me. And it's funny now because like that's just part of my regular routine. But that was also when my dad's like, oh, I'm going down to Montana for this race this weekend. Do you want to come? I'm like, okay, there's a 5K. I'll sign up for the 5K. You know, just basically just the way to spend the weekend with dad, you know, on a little road trip. Because Montana is like about 30 miles from where my hometown is. And then it was like, oh, I'm going to California for this half marathon in the summer. Do you want to come? I'm like, okay, I'll try the 10K first. You know, and then I remember the first 10K I did, I'm like, my goal was just run 5, walk 5. And I'm like, oh, that was fun. And it was in the redwood forest. And I'm like, oh, this is really pretty. You know, I'm like, okay, I'm kind of into this. And then the next year he's like, do you want to go to that race again? I'm like, yeah, but I think I want to try the half marathon. And then it kind of just kept going from there. Like, okay, well, now I want to try the marathon. And learned, like, watching my dad, and like he'd go running every day, but he never followed a plan. He never had, you know, a coach. He would just go run in the trails near our house. And he might increase his mileage a little bit before an event, but not really. Like at the time we didn't even have Garmin's. Like it was just like, you just go and you roughly estimate how far you've ran, right? And so one year, finally, after a couple of years of doing these, like slowly building up my distance, dad's like, do you want to try this ultra marathon in our hometown with me? It's one that he did every year. He'd been doing for years. And I'm like, okay, even if I have to walk it, I could still probably finish it, you know, in 10 hours. It was a 50K. And so that was the first ultra marathon I did. And, you know, I got a lot of ups and downs in it, quite a bit of elevation. And I finished it in under 6 or 7 hours. I can't even remember the first one because, of course, don't have a Garmin, haven't recorded it, don't even know what the exact mileage was. And I loved it. I just loved being out there all day and just the feeling of like pushing yourself to that extreme. And I remember the feeling I had after that first ultra marathon is like, if I can do that, I can do anything. You know, like I don't think I've ever had that feeling as much as I did that at that point. And then from there I was kind of hooked. So it just got more and more extreme after that, I guess.
That's such a great lesson though. God, you got to underscore that for everybody. That's why I try to convince people to come on over. And when I say even just ultra, just even trail running, period, because trail running takes your mind and focus off of what we said. It's not about pace. It's not how far you're going. You just have to follow the trail so you don't get lost, for one thing. And with trail races, it's nothing at all like running a marathon or a road race where there's always someone in front of you and you always know where you're going.
Sometimes you're alone. Yeah. You are alone in nature and in the middle of nowhere. I remember one race I did, I drove up to, so British Columbia is the province next to us, drove up there for this. It was something called Something Hellish Half Marathon. I didn't even research it, knew nothing about it, didn't realize it. It went up over 3,000 meters. I'm alone by myself on top of a mountain. There's snow on top of the peaks and there's a steaming pile of bear poop. Like he'd literally just wandered by and it was right there and I'm by myself and I'm like, okay, what is going on? But like, you're in this feeling like I'm literally in the middle of nature, like untouched nature.
That's beautiful. I mean, it's just, that's the kind of, story, you know, that we recollect from our experiences that, you know, it might scare the shit out of somebody and go like, I'm never doing a trail race now, but I'm just like, that doesn't make your heart beat. If that doesn't, you know, make you feel alive. And again, I've run 57, 58 marathons. I mean, I've been running, I'm 60 years old. I've been running for 30 years. So, and I wasn't like you, I was a high school and college baseball player. So I played all the other sports and running was punishment or part of what we did, you know, get ready, suicide drills, this, that. Occasionally we do a little bit of a longer run, a mile or something for a gym class, but running was not at all. You know, I loved running, but I loved being the fastest kid on the team, stealing bases in baseball. I didn't think like, oh, I want to be a long distance runner. So it didn't come to me until much later in life. But the trail stuff is just, it's just so unique in every aspect. And people think, oh, I can't run Leadville and I can't run at 12,000 feet. Well, there's a million trail races where they're flat. I mean, you can find a flat trail race in certain parts of the country, or you can find ones that are at 10,000 feet like Leadville. I mean, it's really up to you. What are you looking for? I mean, there's a million great websites that will direct you to what are you looking for. And if you want to be in the mountains and you want to feel connected and just have spectacular vistas and be around nature, man, get involved, because I guarantee you, you said it. When you do something like that, you literally feel like there is nothing that you can't do, or pretty much, I think that's exactly what you said, or close. But yes, you literally feel like, okay, if I can do this, what else could I do in the rest of my life? What else have I thought I maybe couldn't do that I actually might be able to do if I could run through this, if I could run over these peaks through bear poop and feel like, wait, my heart's on fire. Like, if I can do this, what else could I do in my life?
But I think too, in the like trail running and ultra running community, like for people that are intimidated to go to a race or have done like, a marathon road race or something, the atmosphere and the vibe and the sense of community is completely different. Like, you go to an ultra marathon and there's probably 50% of the participants that have planned to walk or hike the whole race. And everyone is just there to support you. It's not about how fast you are. It's not about like what gear you have or anything like that. It's really like everyone is just there to enjoy it and support each other. I think I noticed that like the most when I transitioned from the like road to trail runs.
It's a great observation, and it's definitely something I passed along too, because I'm still so new in the trail ultra community. There's a community, that word does not fit anywhere better than an ultra and in trail running, because people will literally stop if they see you're cramping, if they see you're stuck. People will stop. They will stop and backtrack and be like, are you okay? Do you need something? Do you need a salt tablet? Do you need some tile? Like, they will literally stop. And don't even get me started on the aid stations, because
I was just going to say that, actually.
The aid stations are like stupid. Like, it's like entertainment.
You don't want to leave.
Yeah.
You don't want to leave because the people are so awesome.
Yeah.
Right?
See, we're kindred souls, because that's my problem, man. I'm like, wait a minute, you're going to give me Skittles and you're going to give me like Starburst jelly beans? Like, I'm going to hang out with you. Oh, wait, we're going to make bacon. Do you want some bacon? I'll tell you what. Are we coming back here again? No. Okay. All right. I'll hang out and I'll have some bacon. Like, I'm hanging out with these people because think about that. They volunteer, right? We talked before you agreed to come on the show, like how important that is to me personally, people that give back and do things in the community. And that doesn't have to have anything to do with running at all. It's just, it could be with your church or doing things for kids or the elderly. But, those people are out there, for some of these races are a whole day. Sometimes they're out there 12, 18, 20 hours and have a smile on their face, and they're happy. They greet you and they're like, what's up? What's going on, Heather? How's your day going? And if you just give them a little bit of energy, man,
you're looking so fresh. You're looking good. I'm like, I know I'm not, but thank you for
that's so good. Yeah. So this is our mission. We're going to talk people into getting on the trails more, doing more ultras, wherever they may be. So before we get into talking about your huge event that you just took on, how about a little bit of some of your favorite races or favorite race experiences, if you have a couple, because that would be fun to hear about.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. So my favorite ultra of all time, just because this was my first one, and I've done it many times since, and that's also the event that so my first one was 50K. I also did the 100K in it, which was the first time I'd done a 100K race. So that was the Lost Soul Ultra in Lethbridge, Alberta. And it started as a small local ultra marathon, and now it's huge. It sells out within a day, and people from all over Canada and the States come to it. So Lost Soul Ultra is one of my it has that place in my heart. So 2 years ago, I did the ultra trail in Cappadocia, Turkey. And that was just an incredible event. They have multiple distances. I did, I think, the 65K there, but going through, I don't know if you've seen pictures of the hot air balloons over the sort of hoodoo-shaped mountains in Cappadocia, Turkey, but it was just, it was like you were on another planet. And Yeah.
I think I remember those from your feed. I mean,
Okay, yeah.
you've, I mean, honestly, some of the pictures in there are
Yeah.
really, just
Yeah.
beautiful. The colors, and also
Mhm.
you've been to a lot of great places. So,
Yeah.
that helps. Because
Yes.
look, wherever we go, if you're not going to run, like, what are you going there for? I mean, come on, man.
Like, I know.
It's the best place in the way, what's the best way in the world to
Yeah.
visit any place is to do it on foot.
Well, that's the funny thing. A lot of times when we travel, and sometimes my friends will come with me, and I'll go out for my runs, and I'll find things that like we never would have found if I hadn't been out running and going, kind of to some random spots. And then I'm like, oh my, I'll come back and be like, we have to go see this. You wouldn't believe what I saw on my run today. Or, when you're traveling and you wake up at, 5, 6 a.m. to go for a morning run, and you get to run through like the old gated town of an old village in Greece before all the tourists show up, and it's quiet, and you get to see like the locals, starting their day, and it's just, you get a completely different experience
in every way. And those different experiences, it just adds such texture and depth to our experiences. And for me, that's where I get my food recommendations and other things. Like I want to talk to those people when I'm out in the middle of nowhere, and I'm
Exactly.
like, yeah, hey, what are you doing out here? I'm like, I don't know, I'm just running. Yeah, where did you start? They're like, what? Yeah, oh yeah, I started there. Well, how are you getting back? I'm like, I'm running back. They're like, what? Like
that's like the same conversation
yeah,
with a lot of people. They just
Yeah.
don't get it. But then even places, I'm like, one of the things that stands out for me too, this was just on one of my morning runs when I was visiting Sri Lanka. I was running through some villages in the countryside. These people are living in tin shacks that are the size of my dining table. And every morning I'd run by this one house, and the husband of the house would climb his coconut tree. Like, this is like a 30-foot high coconut tree, and get me a fresh coconut and open it for me. And one day he was not there, and his wife, who could speak no English, made tea for me. And I'm like, you have nothing, and you're going out of your way to just, help me. And they wouldn't take any money from me or anything, like nothing. And it was just the whole village came out to say hello and wanted to take pictures. And it was just like, where else would you get that if you weren't out, running in a random little village by yourself?
That's easily the coolest travel story somebody has shared with me, because it's not about, Four Seasons and all the great places that I've gotten to stay over my business career, because I've traveled so extensively. And I worked in the high-end incentive marketing hotel industry for incentive travel, for top performer trips. And, it just was a wonderful 15 years of my life where I just got to play golf with executives all the time. And every time a new, Four Seasons would open up our Ritz, it'd be like, oh, come here because we're getting ready to open. It's like, okay, well, it's Christmas.
I guess so.
I might come. How many people can I bring with me? And it's like, you just go, and these people, like, they have great jobs. I mean, obviously, but that's so much cooler and has so much more depth to it that, she can't speak the language, her husband's not there that day, and she's making tea for you, something totally different, because they're opening up their heart. They're opening their home to a complete stranger because they've seen you regularly on your run. So to them, they're probably just amazed that you were doing this every day. They have no idea why or how, but they're just like, well, let's be friendly to her. Let's be hospitable. So you're going to need to work on a travel book. I think you need to write a travel book.
So this is, I haven't really spoken a lot about this, but I'm going to post that. I haven't posted any of I have pictures of the family and everything. I wanted to share that on my Instagram soon, but ironically, I just had a job offer, and I'm actually moving to Sri Lanka in August. So this is like kind of coming full circle. So yeah.
Oh, wow. So now you can, you're going to have to bring some kind of really neat gift for them. You have to bring something for them.
I can remember exactly where the village was, and it's far from where I'm going to be working, but obviously I know exactly where it is, and I hope
Yeah.
they're still there. I really hope they're still there.
Well, how cool would that be if you just knock on their little door of their little house and you just,
Yeah.
whatever, it could be a tea set. It doesn't have to be, it's not about the money.
No.
It's just about being thoughtful. So
Yeah.
that would be super
Yeah.
cool. So, wow,
Yeah.
more adventures, more travel, more
Yeah.
countries. I think you're going to have to maybe do a travel vlog as well, or just, you'll do a travel section. I mean,
I'll
you're
mix it
already,
all in.
yeah, come on.
Don't add
man.
more to my plate.
Yeah. Well, we have Heather runs trails. I mean, I guess we could do a travel too, but we'll leave it for where it is. Yeah, I think it's good. So I read about this amazing event that you were part of, that you put together in Doha. And I was just amazed by reading some detail about it. Then I followed their Instagram page. It was Desert Roses Challenge. But rather than me even try to attempt and butcher explaining like the purpose of it and what it was all about and how many people were involved and all that, just take it away. Tell us about it, because it's super cool.
Okay, so this is something that sort of started coming to fruition in the fall. One of my good friends here in the running community, Stephanie Innes, she's helped organize and come up with some great ideas for other events in the past. We did a 90K east to west running event to promote, again, awareness of women's equality in sport for Born to Run, sorry, I'm butchering, it's the charity for women, Free to Run. So that was taking a handful of women in Doha who had maybe never run before, or only 5-10Ks, and getting to a point where they ran a 90K run across the east to west of Qatar to promote this initiative. So she's had a lot of great ideas in the past, but so she approached me sometime, I want to say in September, and said, I have this idea. I'm like, oh no, here we go. So she said, since nobody's really traveling now and we have a lot of time on our hands, what do you think about joining me for this run around the perimeter of Qatar, which is about 500 kilometers? And she's like, I just wanted to choose a few of the women in our running community here that I know could do it, who I also know I could spend 5 days on the trail with, and that who will also be actively involved in promoting the message that we're trying to send here, which really is in this country to show women that they can participate in sports. It's culturally and it's just not a big thing for them here. I would say sports in general, they like to watch sports here, but just even working with children here, I noticed that involvement in sports is not a big part of their culture here. A little bit with soccer. Soccer's a big, or they call it football here. But so really we wanted to show that all of these things are not just for men. No, you don't need to be intimidated. You can do it. I think that's another thing, is that a lot of people think they can't do it, right? So that was really the message we wanted to promote. But so she wanted to get, some publicity for being able to be the first group of women to go around Qatar on foot. So that's where the idea started. And so we started planning that a few months ago, also knowing that it might get shut down with all the COVID restrictions. We never knew, is this actually going to happen, which is why we also kept the group small. We knew like the smaller the group we had, the more likely we'd get around any sort of restrictions. And then we didn't publicize it much until the end, because we also didn't know if it was going to be able to happen. So was it 2 weeks ago now we started, and we also wanted for it to coincide with the National Sports Day here. So that's every year here in February, there's a national holiday, which with the intent to promote sports activity in the community. So I would say they're trying here, the mentality is progressing. They're really trying to get community involvement in different types of sports activities. Just general well-being is not something that has been a huge focus here, right? Diet, exercise, everything like that, health, from the health perspective, has not been a big focus in this culture in the past. So that's another thing, is that it's really about being healthy. It's not about how you look. It's not about, having to do a marathon. It's just about, getting active and getting healthy. So that's how it came about. And we also had to work out the logistics of it, because this was essentially a self-supported event. A multi-day event was going to be 500 kilometers over 5 days. So we're trying to figure out, how many hours a day do we need to be on the road? What pace do we need to keep to fit within this timeline? How are we going to get food? How much are we going to carry on our backs? Where are we going to sleep? Things like that. So it was really figuring out all the logistics. So we ended up getting some really amazing sponsorship. We had all of our camping gear and main meals and a support crew who were actually some of my friends who own their own businesses here that sponsored us through their company. So that was ID Works and Coffee District in Qatar. They were lifesavers. That was life-changing to, every night we would just rock up around 10 o'clock at night, and camp would be set up for us, and they would hand us food as we crawled into our tent and passed out. But and then in the running community here, we also had a lot of friends and even people I didn't even know, never met before, volunteering to come out for 2 hours, 4 hours, 10 hours during the day, following us with their cars, having food and drinks for us, helping us. Sometimes we had to be on the road, so like making sure that we were safe when we were on some of the major highways, like we had escorts some of the way. So to see the amount of people that just volunteered their time to come out and watch these 4 women run/walk around all of Qatar for days on end was amazing,
That's absolutely awesome. It from start, from the idea, when it's kind of hatched and to it being fully formed and coming together, and then having, different groups come to help support you with food and camping and, logistics and following, because, the expression, it takes a village, is never more apt for talking about doing anything long or difficult or extended on trail, or people trying to do these fastest known times and run the whole Appalachian Trail. You can't do any of these things. I mean, some people actually do completely unsupported, and they just have like mad respect. Be able to lug and carry every single thing you have and continue to refuel yourself along the way. However, you're making that happen, whether things are stashed along your route. You just have all my respect, but you have safety issues. You have so many issues to navigate. I mean, for one thing, you're women, you're out in the middle of the desert. I mean, God, you have to be sure you're going to be okay. And somebody's like watching you all, and you're not going to get snatched in the middle of the night. Meals, food. I'm sure the temperature, is it a huge drop, from like day to night? Because obviously I don't know. I haven't been to Doha, so I don't know.
Yeah. So that's why we planned it for this time of year too, because any time outside of, I would say, December to February, you might be getting 35, 40 degrees Celsius, sorry. That's close to, I think, 100 degrees Fahrenheit during the daytime. And then at night, we had a few nights where it was down to about 8 degrees and foggy and damp. So that was 8 Celsius. Sorry, I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit. But we had a couple of days where it was over 35 degrees Celsius in the peak of the day. So we had ups and downs. There was days where the heat did slow us down. And there were nights when it was a bit hard to sleep because it was pretty cold in that tent. So
you really had to be prepared for tremendous changes, not only in your running conditions, but sleeping and all of that. For anybody, this is like such a amazing thing to take on or tackle, but your state of mind is changing all the time. I mean, you're continuing to go back out there and pile miles on. Give us an idea, like how much were you doing in a day? Like how many kilometers were you trying to tackle in a day?
Yeah. So this was my first multi-day, multi-stage event I'd ever done. So I had no idea what I was getting myself into or how my body would even handle it. Originally, our goal was to do about 100 kilometers a day and finish in 5 days. And the goal was to, run at least the first 25, 30K every day and walk at a pretty solid pace for the rest of it. And if, by the end of the day, you have a little reserves, jog that out. But from the first day, things started to go wrong. And plans had to be completely revised. So I think that was also part of it in the end, where, you know, some of the girls felt like we didn't accomplish anything, which we had to reframe as like, we didn't accomplish our original plan or our goal, but we still achieved something pretty huge. So the first day we got our 100K, but one of the girls got really injured about midway through that day. And eventually, like, she tried to push through. It was our only day one, but it got to a point where she said, for the team, I need to pull out because the pace that I'm able to keep is going to slow you guys down so much that, you know, this isn't fair to you guys. And that was a really hard decision, right? Because it's only day one. So because of that, we got a little less sleep the first night than we had planned. I mean, 2 hours for me, basically.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Ouch.
And yeah, so the next day, then we're like, okay, well, by 80K on the second day, after having a really like scorcher of a day, people are starting to, you know, their hips are starting to go, their shin splints are starting to kick in. We stopped at 80K that day, just thinking like, we'll make it up tomorrow. And it kind of spiraled downhill from there because the injuries started increasing for some of the girls. And it was surprising because these were all really, really strong athletes, really strong ultra runners. You know, some of them have run like, what was it, 9-hour 90Ks within the last couple months. So these are good athletes. So it was surprising, and I think just a bit unlucky that I would say all but me, surprisingly, because I would say I was the weakest link of the group, started getting pretty serious injuries popping up quite early on, which in the end, I think that was one of the major reasons where we changed our plan. We revised our plan completely towards day 4. So originally we planned a 500K loop, trying to stick to as close as the coastlines as we feasibly could. And by the end, we said, you know what? We're going to have to add an extra day to the 5 days already, just because we've had to cut down like our daily mileage because of injuries. And they just said, I don't think we're going to make the 500. Can we make sure we make a 400K loop? You know, is this a decision we can make as a team? Because the discussion was, do we try the 500 and fail? Or do we still complete a loop, even if it's a bit shorter, right? So these are all things we're trying to discuss on the road as we go. So we kind of said, let's try to at least finish a loop, even if it's a little bit of a shorter loop. By the last day, day 6, it got to a point. So I should say one of the days I didn't participate because I had to go to work. I got called into work, which I knew was going to be a possibility. And there's nothing I could do about that. So I missed day 4, I think. Day 3 or 4, day 4. And so day 6, the last day, we started in the morning. We just, you know, woken up from that, 8 degree at night camping in the middle of the desert. Planned to get going on the road by 5:30. It didn't happen. It was dark and cold and foggy. Got on the road by maybe about 6:30 in the morning. And within about 2 kilometers, the 2 girls who had still been on the road for the whole distance at that point said, I don't think it's safe for us now to push ourselves any further. They were having, intestinal problems that we had actually had a doctor friend come out and check and said, I would highly recommend not continuing on, although they still wanted to, serious shin splint issues, foot issues. There was things that were like, how much permanent damage are they going to be doing if they keep pushing forward? So at about 5K on the last day, we all said, what do we do? I think at that point, the girls could only keep up about a 3 km/h pace. That's how much pain they were in. And we said, okay, we started as a team. We want to finish as a team. How do we do this? We know we haven't achieved the original plan that we set out. So at that point, I said, you know what, do we just say we keep someone on the road the whole time for this last day to make sure that, we just get back to Doha, to the city where we plan to finish. And at that point, that was the best decision for the team. And I was the only one on the last day that was able to finish that day. And, the others joined for parts of it. We all finished together at the end. We all said, we're doing this as a team. We're going to finish it together. And we must have had about 50 people, supporters, people in the community, maybe more than 50, come out and, walk the last, I would say, about 15 kilometers with us. They had set up, we didn't realize, a big finish line right in the harbor in the city center for us to finish, with flowers and, plaques. And it was just incredible, because I'm like, in our minds, we're like, we failed, but we still had all these people saying, like, what you did was so amazing, So that was almost one of those things where, as athletes and ultra runners, they were saying, we did it so slow. We didn't do the full distance. We're normally like so much faster. Like on paper for us, when we look at it, it's like, this is not a big deal. And then it's almost like you have to give your head a shake and say, like, you know what, you just traveled 400 kilometers around Qatar in less than a week.
On foot.
On foot, yeah, not in a completely on foot.
Sleeping in tents in crazy weather extremes with no crowds or no people to cheer.
No,
I mean, sure, at the end and a pseudo finish line that was put together, but it's perspective. Don't dare for a moment allow yourself or your teammates, your comrades in arms to think that way. Although I understand, if I was part of that group and I had planned in my head that I was going to do 500K or 400, whatever the number is, that's the way we're wired. We don't take on a huge challenge and think, okay, well, if I do a little less than what I said, I'll be really excited. It's just not, it's not the way we are. And with runners in particular, it's the reason why we usually can be really successful in life and business in our careers, because we're driven, man. We don't drive for goals and then say, I'll be happy I just did 60%. That's good enough for me. No, it's not good enough. And it has nothing to do with how fast you run. It has zero to do with that. It has to do with people that are goal driven, and running just clicks with us, with ultra trail community people. We want to see how far we can go. How far we can go is one of these single biggest things we always want to prove to ourselves. And that has nothing to do with pace. And how far you can go can be walking, it can be running, it can be limping, it can be whatever, but you're moving and you're continuing to get further down the road. So, I mean, what an adventure. I think some of the coolest things about it, when you think back and why did we really do this to begin with, was the message we were trying to send, right? And so to be out on the road in the middle of the desert and have there's a few construction workers standing at the side, and they stopped and they watched, and one of them says, "Are you the Desert Roses? We saw you in the newspaper. We heard you on the radio, and we're so excited to see you." And to have locals that live in the small villages come out and were handing us like food and inviting us into their homes. And we're almost offended when we said we couldn't sleep at their home that night because we had to make up some more mileage. But for people to have heard about the event and went out of their way to find us, or when they saw us, they're like, they couldn't believe what we were doing. And then they were recording it and sending it to all their friends and being like, guess who I just saw out in the desert? And then afterwards, even I got a few messages from, the parents of some of the children that I work with saying, we're so proud of you. We're so glad you showed this message for women and girls here to show what they can actually do. And, these are local Qatari women that, this is a population that we really wanted to show, like, you can get out there, you can be part of a sports community, you can get active, it's not just for the men. So that was, when you think about it, and like, we still got our message across. And that was the ultimate goal of the whole event, right? You absolutely got your message across. I mean, it's about empowerment, and it's about when sports aren't at a grassroots level for kids or girls or a faith group, a religion, whatever, group of society that's cut off and isn't open and doesn't feel welcome and isn't being encouraged, and maybe doesn't have anyone that looks like them, where they say, oh, he did that. He looks like me. She did that. She looks like me.
Yeah.
Like, this is somebody I can look up to. I
Yeah.
want to emulate this behavior, this person. I want to be like her. I want to be like
Yeah.
him. So it has nothing to do with how fast you were all running or the fact that you had to revise your goal. I mean, life, ultra marathons, there's nothing in the world. You want to learn about problem solving, go run an ultra marathon. I don't care if it's 50K, 50 miles, 100K, 100 miles, 250 miles, a stage race. You will find out quickly in life how good you are at problem solving, because no plan will ever actually happen the way you think it is when you start up, whether the race is starting in the middle of the night and it's pitch black and you got headlamps and hand lights, or the temperature drops, whatever, your fuel, your salt levels, cramping, tripping, like 100,000 things can happen to you. But so many of them teach us the most incredibly powerful lesson. So yes, you didn't get your goal that you all mapped out on paper, but you did something insanely cool. You just showed people like, hey, you're saying to young girls out there that are not involved in sports at all or don't have anybody to see, they're going to see that in the newspaper, on TV. And it takes one girl, two girls, three girls to say like, Mom, I want to run. They or mom obviously didn't run because women in sports don't really exist there. It certainly hasn't existed in past versions of culture. So that's how change comes about. And it doesn't have to come about quickly. It doesn't have to come about at, crazy pace. It can be even glacial maybe, but the fact is you did something awesome. So you should all feel really good about yourself. It's inspiring as hell, man. It's awesome. So great job.
Thank you.
And I hope your teammates, feel that way, or maybe if they don't right at this moment, I hope they will as some time goes on, because time gives us perspective. And, look, we can only do so much when we're really injured or we're having true intestinal problems. Like, there's only so much you can do. There's things you can manage and work through, and there's things you can't,
Exactly.
And, you had to go to work one day. I mean, I'm sure that's the last thing on earth that you would want to do, but it happened. And it's great that you were able to come back strong the last day and then give that contribution to the team to help the team.
Yeah, that's what I felt like. I'm like, okay, I feel like I let you guys down a little bit, but I redeemed that. And I think also finishing as a team, even though one of the girls actually had to hobble the last 300 meters with her walking poles as crutches, but it was like, it doesn't matter. We're finishing this together, regardless of what happens. So.
Well, I think it's fantastic, and you should all be proud of yourselves. And I have no doubt everybody who listens to this episode is going to be like, wow, they're a bunch of badasses. Not only are they running in the desert, like even just running, period. They ran around all of Qatar. Like, that's just completely nuts. You're going to have to send me like links from, everybody who helped you, from the organizing side, who your teammates were, their Instagram handles, all of that. If anybody wrote any articles or anything that I can link to for the page, this way, anybody who listens to the pod, and it'll be up on YouTube as well, but links are an easy way for people to get that exposure and just see, see what you all did, because it's awesome, man. It's good stuff.
Thank you.
So do you have anything? I know you've got to be straight up recovering right now and focusing, and you got a long-term plan to get to Sri Lanka. What's something big before we roll out of here, or maybe even something you've been thinking about that maybe you want to take on? It doesn't have to be even running related, just something you're thinking about here before we roll out.
Well, I'll be honest, I haven't planned a lot with all the COVID stuff, because I feel like every time you plan something it gets canceled, right? But this event actually showed me that I kind of want to try more like multi-stage events. So I'm hoping there's a big one in Sri Lanka in the spring that I'm hoping will still be happening when I move there. So that's still probably a year away, but yeah, in the meantime, I'm just going to enjoy my last few months in Qatar and hopefully get back to Canada to see my family in between. And that's about it.
That sounds really great. I'm going to have to check into some of the the stage races. I think,
Yeah.
to me, that's like a travel adventure and a race all rolled
Yes.
into one, because,
Yeah.
I'm sure you have days where you're feeling like the king and high as a kite, and other days you're
Yes.
like, what am I doing here? Get me the hell
Yeah.
out of here. But,
Yeah.
at some point, like we all do, the second wind, whatever, the third wind, who knows how many winds on these multi-day things, the distances
Yeah.
people are running and they're doing. It's just, it's inspiring. I use the word a lot, but it just is. When I see some of the things that people are doing and how far they're covering, like you all did, I don't care about I couldn't care less if you walked 500K. It's mind boggling, the distances that people are covering and these challenges. And then also the terrain that they're on, like you're all in the desert and other people are in the mountains at crazy altitudes and elevations. So it's just super cool stuff.
I think it was just fascinating to see how your body responds. Like the morning of day 2 was probably the hardest, because that was the first time I'd woken up after doing 100K and, hey, I'm supposed to do it again today. But by the third morning, I was like, your body is almost used to it and it's your routine. I'd only had a few hours of sleep, but I'm just going to get up and throw my running stuff on, and I smell awful and I'm covered in sand, but I'm just going to do it again today. And so it almost just became that routine after that. So it was really interesting to see how that played out.
And isn't that a great lesson to just kind of plant that seed with everybody before we roll out of here? Like our norms and our levels that we work our way up to when we build our way up to. So many times we think, oh, I could never run further than that. I could never, go a distance like that. My body couldn't hold up. I couldn't hold up. But I think what we all learn, and I know I've learned, and I'm learning still just at 60, that, that's why I love David Goggins so much, because I think the mindset piece of it is so important, because our bodies will crack. Our brain will start telling us in every way that it can to stop. It will create ways to stop. Like if you're somewhere where a porta-john's there, you're like, oh, I need to go to the bathroom. You don't need to go to the bathroom. It's just like, I'll stop and go to the bathroom. And the next thing you know, you're like, you might not want to get back up off of the toilet. And you're like, okay, I'm out of here. But the funny thing is, if that wasn't there, your brain doesn't have that chance to like throw that little suggestion at you. And it's not a little suggestion either, man. It's like, come over here right now. Don't keep running. We don't need to do this, but you just can't believe like how much further you can take that threshold out. And so you're running 60 plus miles a day, or like getting up. That was the longest you'd run. And then you're doing that a day, and then the next day and the next day. And it doesn't seem possible. It just doesn't, but you did.
And I still remember back to the time where I thought, I don't know if I can finish this 10K, So.
Yes. Yeah. And those are great lessons and experiences to share, because we all started somewhere. And for some of us, it was to run a whole block, or to run to the park, which might've been, 3 or 4 blocks from where our houses were, where we grew up. In your case, you grew up in the mountains. We run to a distance. That's why I always love fart. Like, you run telephone poles, or you run to the next tree. Like there's always some, landmark that we're trying to get to. And the amazing thing is that landmark has become from, a block or blocks or miles to, like you said, finishing a 10K seemed important. You said in the beginning of the episode, you said you'd run 5K and walk 5K.
Yeah, that was my goal.
Yeah. and it was a good goal. It was a good goal then. And for anybody listening right now, this isn't like to make you feel like, wow, I'm not an ultra runner. No, it's the opposite. It's just showing you that you could start all the way back at that level and actually make it to where Heather's at right now, or any other of my guests who've been on. I've had Mike Wardian and some other ultra runners on who've just done some pretty amazing things. And, it's amazing what we actually are capable of when we try to push our mind off to the side and just say, let me just go on free flow state and let's see what happens,
Exactly.
and take it from there. But, it's been awesome getting to know you a little on the show. It's been super fun. And thanks for waking up so early and sharing your awesome, community event there, which is just crazy. And also just your life history, running history, travel adventures. It's all super exciting stuff. So everybody give Heather Runs Trails a follow, Heather Runs _trails a follow on IG. Definitely check out our episode. And, appreciate you coming on, and all the best with everything you got going on over there, and getting home to see your family in Canada and getting over to Sri Lanka. So hope it all goes smoothly and well.
Thank you.
And it's been fun chatting with you. So as we always say when we sign off, Peace out, everybody. And always remember to stay in the fight.